Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Tactical Harmony. And today's guest is Michelle DeStefano. Michelle is an executive coach, keynote speaker, and former chief nursing executive with over 4 decades of leadership experience in complex healthcare environments. She works with healthcare leaders and high performing professionals navigating pressure, change, and performance, helping them quiet the internal noise that limits their leadership and execute with clarity. Michelle, welcome to the Tactical Harmony Show.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. It's a pleasure being here and having this ability to talk to you and your community.
Thank you, Michelle. And I'm going to start off by asking this very amazing question, which is you have spent over 4 decades in executive leadership, to include as a chief nursing executive, which I just think is fabulous. And as we know, healthcare it's a high pressure environment. There is a lot going on. So I would love to hear, Michelle, what did your experience teach you about resilience that perhaps coaching could never teach you?
Sure. Well, what resilience taught me out of experience is that we do have a lot of pressure. Obviously, we have to meet metrics for patient safety, patient experience, and also staff retention and staff engagement. And this can be sometimes very, very daunting to leaders, particularly if they aren't coached and particularly if they don't have a great onboarding or have a way to really focus on themselves and identify their own strategies and know thyself to grow thyself. So I spent probably the first several years really figuring that out about who Michelle DeStefano was so that I could then lead my teams to what I call greatness. But it is a lot of self-reflection and a lot of self-awareness. And part of that with resilience is that it's not that you don't get knocked down or that you don't have challenges or setbacks, but it is definitely how do you, in those challenging moments, learn from that and bring yourself back up and still lean in to how you're going to lead to bring your team to meet their goals, objectives, and also develop them.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you called that out because I think so often people think that they should avoid adversity or avoid challenges and problems like it's the plague. And I'm not saying that we should all have, hard times and tough times, but it is those moments that we're building the character and flexing the muscle and getting stronger, leaner, and faster. Was there an experience, like a notable experience when you were a chief nursing executive that really kind of stands out to you that really allowed you to strengthen your character and build those muscles and really become that gritty person that you are today?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. In my book, Quiet the Voice, Amplify the Results, I do use this as a case study. And this is actually where I developed the SOAR framework. And the SOAR framework is scan the story, own the opportunity, align the actions, and reframe for results. I had a very adversarial patient outcome that did not turn out very well. A patient died on our watch. And in this moment, first of all, the scan the story piece. When I got the call that our patient had died, it was a Friday afternoon. It never occurs any other day but a Friday, and I'm in an outside meeting. And when I first got the call, the first thing to the medical center was, it can't be my staff. We've been talking about safety. This has got to be just something that just happens. There might have been some medication. And then I'm also talking to myself about, oh my goodness, what is this going to look like for my team? What is this going to look like for me? How are we going to talk to the family? So I kept replaying these stories that were emotion. But then when I got to the unit, I had to go into action mode of actually taking away my own emotion and the stories I was creating and do the assessment of what actually happened. To my knowledge, documentation was correct. However, what I found out later after reviewing a video that there was falsification records of a Q15-minute vital sign that was not done. In that SOAR framework, the rest of my I believe, authentic leadership was that I had to identify, even though they called me a nurse's nurse, but even though I had to really look at a situation and say, what, first of all, my own diagnosis of my leadership, was I explaining it in a way of safety that everyone was embracing? What did our teams have to do? So I went into that look without blaming, with just looking at the situation. And I was actually asked in a large boardroom with corporate coming down for this event and for the deep truth analysis, would you at this time admit your family member to this unit? Now, sometimes my inner critic comes out and I think, do I need to say what they want me to say? And do they want my authenticity? They want my honesty. But at that moment was the critical moment in my career where I said, not at this time. And I took the fallout for that, because we had to get the safety precautions and everything else. We had to transform this culture to a different level. And we did do that with Align the Actions and Reset and Reframe. However, 4 out of 5 wasn't bad. There was a perception of me that I might have been a little too emotional. That was okay, because that was the first time I believed that I was really had an impact on that my voice mattered to patient care.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And we know that we can learn more about that in your book. So I'm glad that
Yes.
you called that out as well. And yeah, it's case studies and things like that. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. And that's something that you don't forget anytime soon. And it sounds like in that moment, so many things were born for you, for the hospital, for your team. And there was so many additional things that occurred. And it's always so funny to me, or not funny, but that when these big things happen, it kind of forces our hand to take a moment, take a knee, and really analyze, assess, as you say, and figure out what's important, what's our next step, and how we can prevent something like this from happening again. Absolutely. So since you brought up the SOAR framework, I'm going to kind of pivot there. And I love that you said it: scan the story, own the opportunity, align the action, and reframe the results, which I think is wonderful. And I would love if you could kind of walk us through a little bit, when you say scan the story. Um, I think you kind of indicated in the case study you just shared, it's the story, the narrative that we're kind of telling ourselves. Can you walk us through why that is so radically important as a professional and as a leader, and how we need to become aware of that so we can apply that to our lives and in business?
Sure. Well, what I say when I'm doing my executive coaching one-on-one to my clients, and then also in my group sessions, and then organizational alignment, is this: that scanning the story, and I will walk through in my workshops how does one scan the story. And many groups have come back to me, and that's where they probably spend the least time, and that's probably where they need to spend the most time. But in scanning the story, what it really is about is that we have already preconceived notions from whether it's our upbringing, whether it's role models. And to give an example of this that's very well lived, one of my clients, for example, had gotten a scholarship for she was an athlete, and this is how she was going to go into nursing school with this scholarship. And she ended up having an injury. And in that injury, obviously, she had to go through rehabilitation services and get back up to speed with her strength. She gets back on the team, but she still wasn't fast enough. Okay. And so she was benched. And when she came to me to learn more about executive presence, we would go through scenarios, and I would ask her, where is the time where she did not feel that she had executive presence? Or where was the time that she did not have the skill set? And her answer was, well, I think it's all in my head. And I said, deep dive, let's talk about this more. She brought up the fact that she was benched. So her own story was, no matter what was happening to her, good, bad, or indifferent, she was waiting to be benched. She was always concerned about being fired. And that's how she translated it to her now adult years of going into executive leadership positions. And we had to really deep dive this. So the loudest voice sometimes, even though I work with a lot of high stake individuals, high professionals in high stake environments, the loudest voice sometimes is not external, but it's the internal one that we have to tame, name it, reframe it, and tame it so that we're not losing the objective of what's really happening. And I've started working with my clients and say, is this fiction or fact? And we start laughing. And a lot of times there is a lot of fiction that we're making up a story and we're already going into a scenario where it's the worst scenario. Okay. They don't like me. I don't do this well. I don't belong here. Okay. And that's a story that we have to soften in order to have our own executive presence so that we are able to lead our teams into the organizational outcomes and the impact and influence that we need to do as leaders.
I could not agree with you more, Michelle. Like the loudest voice sometimes is our own. More often than not, I in my experience in coaching and all the disciplines that I've worked in sectors, it's all in here. It's the mind, the mindset, the thoughts, because the thoughts affect how you feel and your feelings and your emotions dictate how you act. And that makes up your state of being and how you present in the world, life and business. There's not a magic line that separates the two. So I always like to pull that in. And it's so easy to imagine and think of the worst case scenario.
Right.
And I think that, in times of planning and strategy, turning over all the stones and thinking of various ways something could play out could be beneficial and good for you, so you have a contingency plan. But absent of that, if we're thinking of all the bad things that are going to happen all the time, we're not putting our mind on what goodness can come out of something, or if it's going to work out and how that's going to work out for myself and my teams and my business and my clients. And where we put our energy is where we put our life force, where we put our attention, and that is going to grow. So if we're focusing on the negative and the bad, that's going to grow. If I'm focusing on, I've got this, I'm going to figure it out, I'm going to focus on myself, how I present, my knowledge, my skills, my abilities, guess what? That's also going to grow. So that's beautiful. And I love, Michelle, that's the beginning of your SOAR framework.
Yes.
That you develop to really kind of start within. And that's something that we hammer here in Tactical Harmony. You can't lead yourself. You can't lead others. It starts with you.
The mirror image. And then the only opportunity piece really does go into that too. Those are the two elements of the framework that I believe we need to spend a lot of time. And so when I think about where all my learning occurred, it wasn't when everything was going well. In fact, that was complacency at times. Oh, my staff enjoys me and, I'm getting great 360 evaluations. But let's take the incident that I just talked about. That is a piece of learning and growth. And, how I showed up during that time, I made it sound a little bit easy, but I spent pretty much a good year of being on that unit and being present, even as a chief nursing officer, not as a director of the manager, but as a chief nursing officer, grounding, making sure that the staff was included in the next plan and phase. And we grew from that. We grew as a team. And so our engagement scores then went up by threefold after this event. And so that wasn't just about me. That was about leading with the authenticity, but understanding that even though this was such an egregious thing that happened, I can't call it anything else but egregious. And I hope no one as a chief nursing officer goes through anything like this, but we learned and we grew as a team together. And I don't think we would have had that type of impact or influence if this hadn't been a setback or hadn't been a challenge that we needed to move through.
Yeah, the experience is the greatest teacher. Mm-hmm. And, we can hear a lot of things. And then once we're living it, we're walking through it. It's really how we're responding or reacting to it. And so many people in your shoes or your team's shoes could have acted in a variety of ways, right? Like that's a tragedy. Like you said, the word egregious, and, kind of stay in that place of negativity and the what ifs, or like you did and your team did, you were able to turn it around. Okay, we're going to start to do this and X, Y, Z and all of the things, which I'm sure, like you said, it wasn't just a month or two. I mean, this was over a year, and there were so many things that you were able to do to really, bring some goodness and light to things. And that's absolutely incredible. And whoever is watching us right now or listening to us, and if you're going through something, really kind of examine, like as Michelle was saying, the framework, like scan your stories at fact or fiction, and kind of like, what can you own as your part, like owning your emotions, owning your words, how you're responding to it, your nonverbals, your body language. There's so much in our sphere of control that we are able to own, and it's a wonderful place to start. So, as you talk about that voice, that inner voice, I'm curious, in your decades of experience, for high performers, is there like a common inner voice theme, if you will, that these high performers and hard chargers usually tell themselves, like, I'm not good enough, or I got to be number one, that you're like, okay, I've seen this movie before, I've got you, let's walk through it? Like, are there any themes that you see, Michelle?
Oh, yeah. So a lot of it is I don't belong in this room. What am I doing here? A lot of it is playing small. So when I talk about playing small, you're not going to go after the promotion because you don't believe you belong in that room. You don't believe that you have the communication strategies, those kind of things. So that's pretty much the things that I see with my clients. But the rest of it is that silent killer of that I messed up. I should have done this. Revisiting something that could have been a learning experience, but is not now. It could have been a learning experience, but you're beating yourself up so badly instead of saying, okay, wait, what could I have done differently? So there's a multitude of what we're seeing in this space. My whole origin was I was born an identical twin. And there was a lot of comparison, okay? And so probably in the womb and then thereafter, I mean, we were such a fascination because we were identical twins. We looked exactly alike. And individuals would come up to us on the street and just say, your eyes are closer together. Her cheeks are a little bit fuller. She's the outgoing one. You're a little bit more of the introvert one. And so to the point that if you don't find out where this originated, you can't really stop that voice. So I started to really process what was happening to me because I was the oldest twin and I took care of my baby sister. I wore that birth origin on my heart and chest. And I tried to play small because there wasn't enough room for both of us. And that's when I learned to really start changing my voice and changing that there is enough room and space for both of us. But how do we look at this and laugh about it at some time and move on? So, but it does originate. It originates, like I said, stories from the past, being benched, having a criticism, constructive feedback that might not have been as constructive. And it has totally what you think ruined you for life.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and it does require that moments, as it were, of introspection and looking within and kind of examining where you were, where you are, and where you want to go. And a lot of times it starts with childhood, those initial memories, that initial blueprint that you were given. And then, okay, is it serving me? Let's dig in, and then to figure that out, so then we can correct it, course correct, if you will, and live and experience life in the way that we are called to, in the way that we want to. And you totally called me out, so I'll throw myself under the bus. I can beat myself up, and I don't know that I'm doing it, so I have to be very self-aware, and I've worked on that considerably over the last several years, and just beat myself up. Why did I do this? Why didn't I do this better? How could I? Oh God. And you just spiral. So I'm definitely raising my hand. That was something that, and it's something that I did in the past, Michelle, but it's something that I have to continuously make myself aware of. So it's not like it's a one and done. I'm always very self-aware. I try to be. That's how I strive, for that excellence and that greatness, and just know that nobody is perfect. It's the lowest standard. It doesn't exist. And that it's always a learning opportunity, and to not beat myself up, but get better. Another level, another double.
Yes.
Okay. My next question for you is, there is a difference between leaders who survive under pressure and those who perform. I would love to hear your answer here. What's the difference between those two types of leaders? And for those the leaders that survive or just kind of go through the motions, how can they learn to perform and really execute and bring more presence to a high pressure situation?
That's a great question. So the survival of the fittest is one that is pretty much a tactical leader. And this is someone that will, they'll do the review of what has just happened, and they might have the metrics, and that in healthcare we have urinary tract infections that we don't want patients to get while they're in the hospital, and there's a lot of that type of pressure in the healthcare sector. However, what they're missing is how to lead by influence. And so when you start out as a manager, you are going to be a little bit more tactical, and you're going to learn change management. But as you grow into a different leader, you're going to learn change leadership, which there is a difference. The leadership individuals, the survivors, cast the vision. They walk the talk. They ensure that they have a communication plan that resonates to the microsystem level, which is the staff. And as I was moving up the ranks to be chief nursing officer, I prided myself like everyone else. I got promoted because I had a great clinical presence. That didn't mean I had leadership presence. But the further up I got into that hierarchy of corporate leadership and chief nursing officer, the skill now that I had to learn was the leadership expertise of bringing teams together and empowering my teams at the clinical level, the bedside, the department unit level, that was their expertise now. And even though we had a vision to be the best in class, or to have a big, hairy, audacious goal of decreasing our infections by 20%, that was coming from the staff and what they were actually facing. So that is definitely the difference between leading in a transformational environment and leading with a transactional. Transactional is going to award you for the good times, and they are going to punish you for negative things that happen. Now, if I go back to my case presentation, of course, that staff, we had to discipline and they were fired, okay? But that's not happening, 99 times a day. Most of it is learning, and most of it is rethinking on how am I explaining the message, the vision, the strategies, and including the staff on day one to move forward.
Wow. Yeah. The difference between transformational and transactional. That is so eloquently put. And I hope everyone is taking copious notes, because that is so important. That is full of so many gems. And if more leaders and emerging leaders, new leaders really are tuning into this, that is so important. Because of course you have to learn the tactics and the mechanics of things.
Mm-hmm.
But then, as Michelle so wonderfully stated, as you advance, as you grow, as you evolve, then that means your leadership presence and all of those things, and how you're transforming and really kind of diving into the aspirational and inspirational part of leadership, as it were. So kind of going into your mastermind now, I'm so excited to talk about it. So you work with women leaders in your mastermind called the Resilient Woman Leader, which I love the name of that. So what is something that women might run into, perhaps that men may not run into, and how does that show up, and how can women recognize that when something shows up?
Well, in one of my own groups with entrepreneurs as well as other leaders, we were kind of laughing, and I predominantly, being in the C-suite, I work with a lot of men, but what I saw, sometimes I was the only female in the room, but what I saw was that let's take entrepreneur life. The men aren't thinking about what to price for their services. They'll just go to the highest and say, yeah, this is my value. And the women will go, I know this is my value, but someone in front of me may not be able to pay for my services. And how do I just finesse this? So we have just a little bit more of an emotional twist to us. Most of us are, wanting to belong. Probably we'll see that most women have more friends in a relationship, particularly in a husband and wife marriage. And so this is really the way we've been brought up in our societies, still to this day, 2026. So that's one thing. What I also see is in my nursing career, there were male nurses that, for some reason, got promoted, like the 3 years at the bedside. And many of us women, we worked, I was eight years at the bedside, and I went through every phase of nursing leadership, charge nurse, nurse manager, director, VP, chief nursing officer. Okay. And I don't believe that they vacillate on, do I belong in this room or not? They're not critiquing themselves. They're not critiquing themselves the way females do. So that's why I thought, let's bring a lot of women together that have these experiences, and let's reframe and we talk about how we can definitely, even though this is part of our DNA, okay, how do we reframe it that we can get past it? And so that's why I'm curating the Resilient Women's Mastermind. I will be using, it's not a book club, but I will be using literature from Valerie Burton, one of my John Maxwell team mentors, as well as my own book, Quiet the Voice and Amplify the Results. And it is going to be a way that you can remove yourself from your work environment so that you can actually ask yourself reflective questions. We're going to be doing a lot of deep diving and really talking in small groups about how this will look for you and how can you change that thinking so that you become resilient. We will be focusing a lot on what is failure and success. Like I said, I call it setbacks. I hate to use the F word, failure, but we have to align failure and success together because it's aligned together. I could look at this week. I had one board position that I interviewed for, I did not receive. But then I had 2 speaking engagements that I got all in 1 week. So am I going to focus on, oh my goodness, did I really blow that interview, for the board position? Or, okay, maybe I don't have the capacity right now for that, but look what else happened, right? In just 1 week. So it's going to be really reframing how we see ourselves with aligning the setbacks and the successes and balancing out that and then what our learnings are.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And I love the reframe because it allows us to hold on to that power because we all have the power. And unconsciously, a lot of times, sometimes consciously, we give it away. Well, I care what so-and-so thinks. I care what my boss, my husband, my daughter, my whatever thinks. And then we're not owning what we can do and reframe what we can do. And like, as you said, with women, yeah, of course, we are more emotional. That's part of our DNA. It's how we are. But we can also reframe that and use that as fuel. That can be used as a strength for us, not the, do I belong in here? How should I price my services? Which you are spot on, because I don't know all of the men entrepreneurs. I'm kind of going through my Rolodex in my brain. I don't know that they do that. But the women entrepreneurs, small business owners do that. So that's a wonderful call out because now once you know, you can't unknow. And so now that it's on us to own that. And then how are we going to show up? How are we going to pivot so then we can get the results that we are seeking and able to serve in whatever particular craft that you are in. Yes. So this is a wonderful segue to my next question for you. So we talked about your book a little bit, which I want to dive into a little bit more in a second. But you wrote a book, you keynote, you coach, you consult, you have a mastermind. And so what would be the hardest part of translating decades of your experience into something that's scalable and teachable for others? Like, was there like a big challenge that you faced when you're like, okay, I have 4 decades of experience. How do I condense this to be able to put it into a vehicle that I can share and serve others in a coaching capacity?
Sure. Well, the one thing about being in a corporate position, a high stake position, is that at the end of the day, I and my team and the other senior leaders, we had to have the answers. And because that's what we were paid. We were paid, money to have the answers. And so as I personally pivoted, what I found out is that we don't have to have all the answers. We have what we want to do for influence and impact is that we want to bring the answers out in others. That's our legacy. And when I decided to pivot myself in going from corporate life to, I then went into consulting for 3+ years. And then I worked for an entrepreneur. And then I opened up Michelle DeStefano Executive Coaching. Did I have to tweak a whole lot? Well, I felt I was coaching, but not to that point that I was coaching now. See, everyone has resourcefulness. Everyone has resourcefulness. It's our ability as leaders to bring that out. And I think that's when I really started understanding leading with impact and influence. Right now in my consulting operations, I can only help individuals when I go into their organizations to solve their complex problems with them. I'm not going to be there forever unless they have budgets that, money's hanging on trees, right? But I'm going to have to give something back to them that shows them how they're going to influence and make this impact once we leave. And I think that was the biggest pivot for me. Even though I felt I was coaching, yeah, I was coaching, but I also was telling, mentoring, and expecting that this was going to be the outcome. And sometimes telling someone the answer is the easy way out because they want the answer and they're not learning from themselves. So I think that was one of my biggest transitions that I'm very, very excited that I've come to the other side and learned this.
Yes, we're on the other side, and and
Maybe the
I
dark
think there's a
side could
sense
be whatever, whatever side,
yeah,
but it's another side.
yeah, word. Oh, I love that. That's funny. But yeah, and then it's like, and now you're sharing that, so others don't have to go through that. And and maybe this is the answer, but I'd love to hear your take on this. Is what advice would you give your younger self, like just starting out, really getting into the leadership ranks? Would there be? I'm sure there are many things because I have many things that I would love to tell young Rebecca. But if you could pick like the one of the biggest ones, what would you want to tell younger Michelle when she's just starting off?
Be kinder to yourself. Embrace your wins. Continue to keep your humility, and be there for others. It's servant leadership, and sometimes when we get into our own heads, it sometimes comes across as it's about us. But to translate that, it's not always about us. It's about the team, and it's about the organization, particularly an organization that we want to be aligned with. Not everything is a crisis. Learn to really focus on what is really happening here, and it didn't kill me. And so with that, there's worse things that can happen. It could always be worse. And so practice gratitude, and just continuously be your authentic self, and things will turn around for you. Trust the process.
Yeah, and the process. And I think so often we get so hungry for the outcome. And I'm not saying there's not goodness in that, but really the journey and who you are becoming, and the process is where the lessons, the blessings, the learnings, the peaks, the valleys, it's part of that, right? And to really embrace that, like you said, and to do so authentically, that's absolutely wonderful. And so what is your secret sauce, Michelle? I mean, you wear a lot of hats, you're doing so many different things. What is a habit, a practice, something that you do for yourself that helps you continue to operate at peak performance?
Well, I do really take in consideration mind, body, and spirit. And I am a spiritual human being. And with that being said, a lot of self-reflection. And like I said, I really practice gratitude and what these obstacles or challenges really mean to me. The second is that I do really try to take care of myself. And I don't call this, self-care to the point that it is all about me. I do exercise, I eat well. And I think having that balance is extremely important as you wake up in the day and say, okay, here's what I've got to get done. But the first thing I'm going to do is be at my run group. I'm training for a half a marathon again. those kind of things. And the third is really understanding who your tribe is. And sometimes your tribe is not your family member. It might not be your sister. It might not be your mother or father. But get with like-minded individuals, because many individuals don't always get, why are you so productive? I mean, I live I live off of a golf course. I love golfing. And I'm probably one of the few at my age that's still in the workforce, but I choose that. And it's not that I don't like the women golfers, it's just that I have found another tribe of mine that understands and that I can relate to in a very different way. Okay. And that's not being negative or selfish. That's just saying, where you belong. Okay. Not that my inner voice is saying I don't belong here, but who lifts you up and who definitely, definitely supports you, that you can support them into making a difference in this world and the impact.
Yeah, and so many wonderful things you just said, and I want to double tap on the mind, body, spirit, which is something that is very on brand with Tactical Harmony. That all parts of you matter. The mind body connection is real, and when we master that, when we harmonize it, balance it, and we're gonna feel like ourselves. We're gonna feel
Mm-hmm.
good, and when we feel good, we're gonna show up as our best selves in life and in business. But
Mm-hmm.
if we don't focus on ourselves, mind, body, spirit, in whatever modality that looks like for you, then we're not going to be our best selves. And then we're going to run straight into a wall, and we're not going to be able to serve others and our teams again, and work and life and business and everywhere in between, in your community, in your golf course, and whatever your tribe is. You're not going to present as your best self. So really focusing on, as Michelle said, your mind, your body, your spirit, and nurturing all of them, what you're consuming spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically,
Mm-hmm.
makes such a difference. And I've seen it time and time again. And again, picking on myself, I was doing everything for everybody else and
Mm-hmm.
not myself, until I started to do that. And then everything changed for me, for my team, for my relationships. Everything changed radically. So that is a wonderful, wonderful call out. Before we get to your book and end, I do want to ask you, in your experience, what do you think is something that is probably like the worst thing for a culture? Like, this one or two things will actually kill any type of culture in business.
Well, I really believe that it's not the authentic leadership self, and what I mean by that is, we talk about shared governance, shared decision making, and having our individuals have a voice at the table. But many large corporations, it's top down. It's top down. Now, there has to be a top down piece. I'm not saying that we all go in Monday morning and say, oh, let's just do a flat structure and no one's in charge, right? But what I mean by that is that involving all the key stakeholders and really, really caring about what they think. And I found this to be working so well when I was actually consulting growing cardiovascular programs across the United States. But there was a physician in this group that was told to me to be slightly negative. And when I actually talked to this, about the strategy of growing this structural heart program, and the individual, once I got to talk to him and listen to him and listen to what his concern was, he wasn't negative. He had concerns of quality care. He had concerns about picking his team. He had concerns about who should do this type of procedure. Was it the medical side, the surgical side? And he was very proud of what he built. Until we heard that from him and then aligned what he needed to have happen, be part of building his own team and selection process, okay? Understanding what he was contributing and his outcomes and metrics, all right, and helping him build something that was bigger than himself, he was then on board. So I believe we listen faintly. I believe we listen to just respond. I believe we think we have all the answers as leaders and senior leaders. We do not. Those individuals at the bedside are going through this day in and day out, and the complexities and the workarounds. So we need to treat them as team players. And that's where I really think that the culture is breaking.
Yeah, that's a wonderful call out. And sometimes we see, and maybe it's out of survival or a lack of training or awareness, that leaders make decisions in vacuums and they think that they understand and they're just going to keep moving, rather than, like you said, taking that holistic approach and really getting the field perspective, if you will. And that's everything, because that's going to inform your leadership. No one knows everything.
No.
No one knows everything. So it's our job, especially as leaders, to be able to talk to the folks, talk to everybody, to really have more information to make a better, more informed decision, which then promotes a healthy culture, because people feel seen, they feel heard, and you're taking action on the feedback that they are providing you. So yes.
And then reward and recognize appropriately. And that's my other big thing. Reward and recognize appropriately. Reward for milestones, even if it was just a committee got together and everyone attended the meeting. I mean, that's a big step, because the outcomes aren't going to come right away. They're going to come in about 18 months after you continuously do, hopefully, everything the way you're supposed to be doing it, and, regrouping for having to pivot. But reward and recognize appropriately.
Yeah, normalize celebrating incremental victories. Why do we have to wait for the biggest thing to happen, whatever that is, because that's subjective? Why don't we celebrate the things in between? And it makes you feel good. There's a dopamine release. I mean, we could bring in neuroscience here. It really promotes camaraderie and, trust and relationship building. And there's so much goodness to it. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Michelle, talk to us about your book, Quiet the Voice and Amplify the Results. Who is it for? What is it about? Tell us all about it.
So many of the stories in this book are healthcare related, because that's been a lot of my experience. But it's a combination of some neuroscience and also looking at the inner critic and a little bit more about the inner critic and the saboteurs. And but why did I write this topic? Okay. It was from my one-to-one coaching, as well as my own experience, that when there is a disruption, possibly in your career, we're going into in a different direction. Seeing what my clients were going through, where this inner critic kept showing up. Like I gave one example of benching, being afraid to bench. So that translated, I'm always going to get fired. Another individual had gotten feedback that was a very harsh side of constructive criticism, meaning it wasn't really constructive, in front of the whole boardroom, and will never go for a chief nursing officer position, even though they have the skill set. And I wanted to show my own vulnerability. I wanted to show case presentations of what does happen when we play small, the cost of it. And the rest of it is about reflection questions of what your inner voice is really telling you and how to quiet that inner critic. Naming it, taming it. It's not going to go away. It's not going to go away. I mean, just the other week when I thought I didn't get accepted for a speaking engagement, I sent in my video. Okay. I went, then I started critiquing it. I didn't hear the day I thought, oh my goodness, I can't believe I sent this in about, and then I went, stop. Read a section of your book. I mean, we all go through it. I just don't stay there long enough anymore. I go, get over yourself. You'll hear something. If not, it's a learning experience. And I did hear something last night. It's positive. So the thing is it was for that high performing, high stake leader. And it was my first attempt to have individuals understand what coaching is all about, and also to help them through reflection and the resources that I've created to redefine, name it to tame it, so that they can build their dreams. Because I believe that everyone has that potential to be in any room that they so want to be in.
Yes. Oh gosh, they're so good. And my last question for you, and you've shared and imparted so much wisdom with us today. So this might be a hard question for you to answer, but I ask this as the last question in every podcast, and that is, if no one listened to any part of this entire podcast, but this one clip, what is one message or theme that you would like to leave our audience with here today as it pertains to leadership, mindset, or performance?
Sure. Know thyself to grow thyself. Work on yourself so that you can be a great influencer, lead with impact, and create a legacy that is bigger than you, and get out of your way.
Yes. Tell you what, we are our own worst enemy. I could not have said that better. Well, Michelle, before we part ways here today, can you please let our audience know where they can find you if they're interested in your coaching, your mastermind, your book, or anything else about you?
Sure. So I'm very active on LinkedIn, Michelle DeStefano. And also, I have a website, which is www.michelledestefano.coach. And in that website, you can book a complimentary consultation. You can take my assessment from VP to C-suite to see, and also purchase the book through Amazon there. And if you just want to email me and ask me questions, I'm available. And it's at michelledestefano.coach.
Wonderful. And as always, I will put all of those amazing links in the show notes below. Michelle, thank you so very much for your time today, for sharing everything that you have gone through to really help and grow our world. I appreciate you, and I know that our audience is going to absolutely eat this up. So my heartfelt gratitude to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Rebecca, and all that you're doing for this wonderful community. It's been a pleasure.